Welcome to Mach 10 Sports, the September 18th, 2023 episode. Guys, this college football season is just flying by as it always does. As it always does every year. Even when I was in it, fall camp would it would last forever. And then it'd be like you blink and it's Halloween. Stuff like that. It just flies through college football. Let me send the link real quick to our guest that I will tell you about here in just a moment. Let's copy that link, and then we will get rolling. Perfect. All right, guys. Like I said, college football just flying by. Don't take it for granted. I know Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, even Friday can seem slow, and Saturday's here, and you blink, and it's Saturday night. You're watching Pac-12 after dark. It's like, man, where did my Saturday go? That Mississippi State LSU game feels like a lifetime ago. The South Carolina-Georgia game feels like a lifetime ago. Alabama struggling going down to the wire with South Florida feels like a while ago. I'm telling you, don't take it for granted. It'll be Thanksgiving before we know it. It'll be December before we know it. But like I said, last week was not going to be a snooze fest. I think everybody thought it would be. And just like as we always know in college football, when we think it's going to be a snooze fest, it ends up not being. Ask Alabama and Georgia fans. They weren't snoozing at half of their games. Georgia was down 14-3 at home to South Carolina. Alabama was knotted up 3-3 at half of South Florida on the road in Tampa. So both those fans wasn't a snooze fest for them. They were both in wars at halftime going to the games. But we got a lot of action to cover from week 3. We also have a great guest on. We got Saturday Down South, Chris Marler, coming to join us to discuss some SEC football right off the bat. Marler's the leadoff batter tonight, baby. We're moving him up in the lineup. He's usually our 3-hole hitter, but we're going to push him up to number 1. He's going to lead us off right on the show here in about 2 or 3 minutes. And a lot of you probably know him as Vern Funquist, a very fun, interactive, knowledgeable guy that if you don't follow him again, he's already at Vern Funquist. I'll throw that in there again when we introduce him, but does a good job following college football, specifically in the SEC. You also know it's Monday. You know that means we're going to reveal, I've already posted this afternoon at lunch in case you missed it, the Week 4 SEC Power Rankings on this episode. A lot of movement on these rankings. As you probably saw on social media this afternoon, we will also review my money-making bets from this weekend. We got a lot better this week, guys. We got a lot better this week. We got back to 500. We're at 40% for the season. But again, 3 weeks in, we got a lot of film. It's only going up from here. So open up that trust fund for your kid. Start throwing some money. And when he's 18 years old going to college, or she's 18 going to college, tell her to thank Mach 10 Sports and yours truly, Dave Shoemaker. And then we'll go around the SEC and briefly preview this upcoming week schedule. Remember, we'll give you the full previews on Thursday and then the early betting lines that were released yesterday heading in to week 4. But as we're waiting for Chris Marler to come on, we'll get that interview set up here in just a moment. 1 second. Yeah, I mean, we got a lot to cover on this episode. Just waiting for Chris to come on, and we will get him rocking and rolling. We will pull everything else up and get everything rolling, guys. Again, do not take this college football season for granted. I'm telling you, I would encourage you not to do it. We have way too much going on. We just got a lot to cover. We do. We got a lot to cover here. Again, Chris Marler from Saturday Down South about to hop on and join us for this episode. Let's get him on here. I just sent it. Perfect. With him rocking and rolling. Perfect. So real quick, while we're waiting for Chris, we will review this weekend's past scores real fast for you. Share a little screen. We'll roll through this. Let me share my screen for you, and we will talk about it. All right, so in case you missed it, we'll get into these a little bit more in depth right after Chris goes. But in case you missed it, man, LSU right off the bat, man, looking really good. 41-14, getting the bounce back win. LSU probably the most impressive team in the league on Saturday. You got Missouri getting the last-second field goal. We'll go more in depth in that in just a second, but they're getting a big win for Eli Drinkwitz, 30-27 over Kansas State, getting revenge from last year. Getting a 40, they took a 42-10 beat down in Manhattan last year. So big bounce back win for Eli Drinkwitz and his team. They cut it close. Georgia bouncing back, big second half, getting a 24-14 win over South Carolina. Remember, they were down 14-3 right off the bat at halftime. South Carolina was looking really good there for that first half. Really came out with a puncher chase. I like the offensive game plan from Cal Logans. We'll get into that in a minute. Alabama looked disastrous, one of the worst Alabama, at least from an offensive standpoint, I'd seen for a while. Alabama getting the 17-3 win over South Florida. Texas A&M, again, looking really good offensively. ULM, not much of a threat offensively, but A&M getting the 47-3 win against the Warhawks. Florida getting the 29-16 win at home. Big SEC East win. Bounce back win. I told everybody, Tennessee was walking into a hornet's nest that it was like a wounded dog backed into a corner. It's fans, it's program. Florida was coming out. They played this way. Here we go. Chris Marler. Let's get my man Chris on real fast.
What's up, man?
What up, baby?
How are you?
Good, man. Appreciate you hopping on, man.
Of course.
How's everything been?
Well, emotionally not great. That game on Saturday was pretty tough. Yeah, but no, everything's been good, man. It's been fun getting the season. Excited for this week. There's a lot of good games this week, so pretty pumped about that.
No doubt. Week 4 is kind of the one you circled on the schedule. But everybody, as we know, mentioned it before, right when we got on the show, Chris Marler from Saturday Down South also does a Saturday Football Uncensored podcast. You can find him at Vern Funquest. Does a fantastic job covering the SEC. I think you do a good job, in my opinion, Chris, of throwing in some comedic activity into it too, which obviously, as we know, some people take social media real serious. I feel like I'm guilty of it at times, but I always appreciate your comedic relief. Let's get right to it. What are your initial thoughts through week 3? I guess some, if you consider week 0 a week, so it's week 4. What are your thoughts just on the Southeastern Conference through the 3 weeks so far?
So I think I always say this: if we're going to talk about sports, we're going to do it in facts and reality. And I think if you're being objective, and I think this is hard, it's a hard thing for any fan to do. There's a reason why it's short for fanatic. But if you're being objective and honest with yourself, I think it's very difficult to look at through 3 weeks or 3+ weeks at the SEC and think that they are a top 3. They're probably the 3rd best conference in football. And the thing that's really kind of like hamstrung them is like Bama hasn't helped, obviously. LSU looked great against Mississippi State, but like it's the first time in a while where like what the SEC is used to doing is being able to beat their chest when they're on a national level and get away with stuff throughout the season where it's like, oh, we're going to cannibalize ourselves. And, it's so difficult to put on here. And they do it. They have the top recruiting classes every year. They put the most kids in the league. It's like the most talented league every single year. When you look at the actual stuff that's happened on the field this year, they have taken a beating and they've taken a couple licks and that have been really bad for the national narrative, which is, like it's not the fact that you just had Bama get beat by 10 against Texas, because Texas is a really good football team. It's not the fact that you had LSU get boat raced by FSU, because FSU is also a very good football team. But South Carolina getting boat raced by UNC in the way they did, Arkansas losing at home to BYU. But like the issue is that none of those games are true road games. You're like, and like the Arkansas game wasn't on a national scale, but you've had a lot of games early on where you have not looked good against like, non-conference opponents. And it wasn't like they were on the road in tough environments. It was neutral site and it was at home. And I think that there's plenty of season left, and like, who knows what happens to the bowl season, but like you might be in a situation where it's like the only team that we think is elite in the SEC who hasn't really played that much at elite level is Georgia. And they've not only struggled at times, but they have the weakest strength of schedule in the whole conference. So when you get to the end of the year, it's like, it's like Michigan last year. It's like, did they really play anybody? Is this comp good? I think that's the questions you have to answer.
Yeah, the thing that scares me, Chris, and you tell me if I'm wrong here, just from watching Georgia, it scares you if you're a Georgia fan, and I feel like if you're within the program, is hey, we may go 12-0, or as you know, if they go 12-0, they're in the playoffs, even if they lose in Atlanta the next week. But I feel like if I'm a Georgia fan, I'm a little worried that you kind of skim through the whole year, your weaknesses don't get exploited, and as you know, similar to almost last year against Ohio State, you go play a B minus game against a team that's playing an A plus game in a semifinal game, and it's a lose your season's over type deal, and you're sitting there like, man, I kind of wish we would have knew. Like I thought we, like, you know, Glenn Schumann could be sitting there doing something on defense. But I kind of thought we may not be good out there covering the flats if they're just using an example. But man, it's too late to fix it now. We're done. That's what kind of concerns me if I'm Georgia a little bit.
Yeah, I think it's you look at the schedule and listen, the whole thing's going to play out. I remember saying before the season last year, it's like I remember saying, and then hearing Peter Burns say the same thing, which was not only are they going to go 12-0, but they're going to win every single game by 10 plus points. And they obviously had that issue in Como against Mizzou. So it's a long season. Like, who knows what plays out? It does seem like there's so much more parity this year for the first time since maybe 2014, 2007, that kind of feel to it. And I think Georgia's still one of the best teams in the country. And one thing Kirby does a really good job of is, like, he knows what he has on that schedule. He knows it's on the back half of that schedule. He doesn't have to show anything until November, if he even wants to show it then. So, but I do think you're right. Their one concern might be the fact that, like, you're not going to get tested until it's time to get tested.
Flipping, going to the other division, obviously last year, the SEC West, but Nick Saban today, I know you're now a fan, announced Jalen Milroe is earned the job, quote unquote.
Yeah. Thoughts
heading into week 4 here. Officially, Jalen Milroe is named the starter. Chris Marler, thoughts?
Thank God. It was insane to watch what happened this weekend in Tampa as an Alabama fan. Worst performance you've seen. I put a video on the SDS YouTube channel about just like my Monday morning meltdown of like your actual breakdown of like not breakdown of what happened, but just like, you know, thoughts from like a fan's perspective of like how awful that was. And like, I don't think that Saban was doing something. I made a joke about it on Twitter today. I don't think he was doing some chestnut checkers move where it's like, I'm gonna let everybody see how bad this offense can get. I do think he gave them a fair chance and let them play. And maybe he did know all along. It's like, yeah, we're not gonna lose to South Florida. Maybe so. But like, what it screamed to me as somebody that played sports for a long time was, I bet you Milroe didn't handle that very well. And you kind of heard some murmurs about that throughout the week. And that kind of like forced his hand. But also, here's the thing too, is like, I don't think there's anybody that watched that game and is like, you know what? Like, Tyler Buckner gives us the best chance at winning, or that Jalen Milroe doesn't. It was almost like he kind of forced the hand of, like, Jalen Milroe was able to win over an entire fan base and probably most of that team by not taking a snap.
without putting a helmet on. Yeah, right. It wasn't pregame warm-ups. Biggest winner of the weekend.
Yeah, and it is like the most like backup quarterback in the NFL type. Like, man, if you get to hold a clipboard, make 11 mil, like that's fantastic. Like Chase Daniels, you're my hero. But Jalen Milroe, like, aside from even like coming off the field and being a good teammate and doing all those things, I think every single person watched that game and is like, if you're a logical person and you understand the sport of football, nobody's looking at that and being like, you know what, Ty Simpson gives them the best chance to win. Because my question was this: if you think that, I saw several people say like, Milroe, we might have lost that game with Milroe because he's turnover prone, and you got to give Ty Simpson the a chance to win that game. Like, if Ty Simpson was like showed signs of being the starter, he wouldn't be third string going into the season. There's no way they could have evaluated that poorly. And then like the Milroe thing, if you thought Milroe played bad against Texas, and then you saw what those other two quarterbacks did against South Florida, who had the 113th ranked defense in the coming into the game this season, and they were 1-11 last year. What do you think would have happened against Texas with those two playing quarterback? They would have gotten ran out of the building even more so than they already did.
No, I'm a firm believer. If you went and watch, it's like you said, if you're a logical person, I think if Milroe starts that game, Alabama's up something like 17-21, nothing, probably at half, maybe 24. Yeah. It's not pretty. I'm not saying they're going up and down the field like with Bryce Young's back there still. Like you said, you feel Bama wins that comfortably. The score may not be like 42-0, but I think it's, you win a lot more comfortably. Yeah. He's making more plays with his legs, stuff like that. But moving on, now we heard Alabama called a, I should say, quote unquote players meeting here. You just mentioned you played sports. I think from following, you played college baseball in college.
I did, yeah.
All right. So you're an athlete. You just admitted you played college sports for a while. Is it just me, or is the players only meeting one of the most like overstated things out there in sports? I mean, Tennessee's 0-1 after having one last week. It didn't even look good.
Yeah. So I mean, I played baseball, and it's obviously different. It's a different sport, and you gotta. The season's much different. Like there's like so much longer to correct stuff, right? And you can get in slumps and get back out of all that kind of stuff. You can't really do that in football. I'm so sick and tired of hearing about this team's anger, and they got a chip on their shoulder, and they had a players only meet. Am I allowed to cuss on this show?
Yeah.
I don't give a single fuck about any of that. Any of it. Just how angry do you have to be to play well? Because I think that's all anyone cares about at this point. Because it's like every single week I hear Tyler Booker, and I think he's a great kid and a great player and all that kind of stuff. But I'm tired of having the spokesperson of the team to give us a pulse of what's going on in the locker room about how this week's going to be different. You know what? You gave up 5 sacks to USF. And the numbers, whatever conspiracy theory, tinfoil, Alex Jones hat you want to put on and say that oh, well, maybe the team just shut down emotionally because they didn't want to play. They wanted Miller to be the starter. I don't believe that at all, for one. And then 2, it's the players only meeting, is it going to get corrected? Because you've already had, after every single game, it seems like, and then on the preseason, you've told all of us what we want to hear. No, we got it now. It's going to be joyless murder ball. We had a players only meeting. We're going to play angry now. I think I said it on Twitter the other day. It's you didn't play angry. You the anger you had was much more passive aggressive, shut down emotionally. I'm going to storm to my room and you're not my dad. Listen to emo music for the next 15 minutes. We get it, man. We get it. Just start playing better. I'm overhearing about it.
No, absolutely. Again, Chris Marler from Saturday Night Southwest. You can find him at Vern Funquist. Chris, question we didn't go over before.
Yep.
In your opinion, how good is Ole Miss? I know they go to Tuscaloosa this week, the 2:30 CBS game. And honestly, CBS is screwing us with this. They don't have Gary Danielson and Brad Nessler on that. They're giving us the JV team. But
wait,
whatever it is, I forget who I saw. They're going to be at the Big Ten night game.
Who's that?
So it's who is? I think it's is it Penn State? I'd have to go look at the schedule, but I saw
State, Iowa.
Yeah, so they're up. Yeah. So they're up there.
This whole new world of football is very weird. I mean, going to answer your question with Ole Miss, I think that it's scary to think of how good they can be, just because Jackson Dart seems like he's turned a corner this year, and he's. I remember going into the season last year, I had him ranked as the 4th best quarterback in the SEC. I thought who would be at the season's end, even though he hadn't played it down in the SEC. And the reason why I did that was, when you look at going into last season, the 10 years that Kiffin had been an OC or a head coach, and before his time, before going into last season, 8 of those 10 years, he had a quarterback that had at least 3,000 yards or at least 30 touchdown passes, or both. And the only 2 years he didn't, he had a running back that put up 29 touchdowns one year and 2,100 yards the other. So he's got a great running back, Quinshon Judkins. We haven't seen him get off to the same start as maybe last year, but those receivers and the tight ends and the skill position players have been way better this year, I think, than last year, especially at the start of the year. And they've got some really talented guys that have bought into this whole system. Bama fans made a big deal about all Saban smiling and all that kind of stuff in the offseason. And I don't want to read too much into the tea leaves of Kiffin on Twitter, but it is a terrifying thought that this man is this loose going into this game, because he's just openly trolling Bama on Twitter on Monday, and not a 3 seconds before kickoff, get your popcorn ready. The man seems confident, and I think that's a scary thing, because really, when you think about it, there's no one that's really played besides Kirby that's played Bama closer, even in that 2020 season with Bama when they went undefeated.
Oh, the game there was whoever got the ball last, dang near about.
Yeah, it was 48 points last year. They probably should have beat Bama last year, and then in 2021, obviously, I know that game happened as well. But in the 3 years he's been there, you're talking about 2 very, very winnable games for Ole Miss. And I don't think that playing at home in Tuscaloosa with that crowd and the way this fan base has been is necessarily some huge advantage for Bama. I think Bama fans are terrified right now.
Yeah, no, I'm with you too. I was thinking about that too from a home field advantage. I think it's more Alabama fans kind of coming in, sneaking into the bill, kind of what are we going to expect here? Get in some back against I thought Florida this past week. I was man, they're going to be rocking against Tennessee, because I feel like their fan base even was this is kind of our last chance. If we lose this game, we're 1-2. Their back was against the wall. The team, the coaches, staff, and the fans were we can will our team to a victory here. We can help them. No, you
My bad. I was going to say, I genuinely don't think Bama fans have that in them. And I am a Bama fan. I grew up, we used to have season tickets, all that kind of stuff. But like I said, if we're going to talk about sports, we're going to talk about it with facts and logic. And I think that when you talk about this fan base and the way they've been, and again, I'm part of the fan base, it's a very entitled and arrogant group. And I think that for the years and years and years, they've shown up to, even when there are big games and there's a number next to the opponent that's like, between 1 and 10, or they're ranked or whatever you want to say, coming into Bryant-Denny, it has been a really, like, the LSU game 2019 was awesome. There's been other times it's been super loud for sure. But on a consistent basis, no, I feel like even the Texas game, the stadium wasn't full at kickoff. Like the tickets plummeted. Like there were more people watching it, I feel like, probably at home than being in the stadium. And I just don't think Bama fans have it in them to will a team to victory. And I think they're going to go into this game and be like, if it gets nervous, I think you're going to see a lot, or gets close, I think you see a lot of nervous fans sitting on their hands because they don't know what to do.
It's like you said, some restless fans, or if like Alabama comes out there on offense and has like 3 straight drives of a punt, he is a turnover. You're going to hear a lot of, it's going to be more like, what are we doing? More so like, come on, guys. Like, All right, Chris, question 2. I feel like this isn't really talked about a lot from a standpoint, and I'm only bringing this up because he lost last week, because I think it was a big week for last week for Eli Drinkwitz and Sam Pittman. Mm-hmm. So with Sam Pittman obviously not pulling it out against BYU, and their tough slate coming up at LSU this week, A&M in Arlington, and then who is it, at Ole Miss, and then at Alabama. What's kind of what are you thinking tea leaves down the road here? What are we saying at the end of the year about Arkansas?
I think it's a great fan base. I've never had an issue with Arkansas fans. I know some people get like riled up on Twitter with them, but
they get a little more rowdy about basketball than they do football. I think they kind of accept who they are in football. Basketball, it gets a little bit more. Yeah, you're right.
And I think that like one of the things that you saw with Arkansas, I think when they hired Pittman, it was a really good hire. But like, there's a couple of teams in the SEC, and you had to know this was coming, especially when you bring in Texas and Oklahoma. One of the reasons I didn't like that move from the beginning is like there's a ceiling over the heads of some of these teams, like Mississippi State, South Carolina, Arkansas. These are teams that they've flashed at times in the past, like early 2010s, like Carolina getting 3 straight 11-win seasons. Arkansas had 2 or back-to-back 10-win seasons, go to the Sugar Bowl in 2012. Really, really good teams in 2011, 2012. You had the DAC years at Mississippi State, but like you also think about like it's been a program that's been like kind of living in mediocrity for a long time. So when you bring in Pittman, it's a great hire because he's perfect for that fan base and for that school, and he loves being there, and he's bought in, and he's got players to buy in, he's got all that kind of stuff. So the thought of him being on the hot seat is kind of crazy to me because I don't know if he's going to perform. I don't know if he's going to he got to a bowl game in 2 of his first 3 years. He's had, I think, 21 total wins and so far since he's been there. I mean, he had 9 wins in 2021, and you had 8 total from 2017 to 2019 combined for this program. So it's like, give the guy a break, and also just kind of accept like where you're like, don't accept mediocrity, but kind of accept like where things are in the pecking order, because it's a difficult job. And I don't think, again, you should never accept losing or mediocrity like that. You want your program to be as good as it can be. And I don't know if Sam Pittman's necessarily the guy that's going to take him there, but I do know that it's very difficult in this day and age. You saw with a guy like Ed Orgeron at LSU, like when somebody loves that program and is invested into it as much as the fans are and as much as some of those he can get the players to be, I think it's a very special thing. And I think that if you put him on the hot seat, I get some of the reasons why, but I don't know who you're going to bring in there that's going to all of a sudden turn it around. You know what I mean? They're like, if you want to make an argument for it, they're 1-10 versus ranked team since he's been there. But the other argument is this: you had 6 of their 8 seasons before he got there that they finished the regular season with without a winning record. Like 6 of the 8 prior to him being there. In the last 34 years, so dating back to 1990, they've only had 7 total years where they had 9+ wins, and he has one of them. So, I mean, it's not like you're Nebraska from like days of old, like knocking down the door for championships. Like, let's be a little bit reasonable here.
It's like you said, you hadn't competed really for a national championship since it was like 79 with Lou Holtz.
Yeah.
I mean, college football's changed a ton.
Yeah.
Since then. It's like you said, I even feel like Texas A&M coming into the league kind of hurt them from a bit. Because when it was just them and LSU out, the furthest 2 West teams, they could go to Texas and be like, hey, you want to come play in the SEC? And you just brought up the point, Texas and Oklahoma joining the league. It's kind of tough to sell that when you got 3 other teams around you in Texas, Oklahoma, and A&M.
Right.
Yeah, you're right. There's a ceiling to that job. And it's like, who are you going to go hire if you're getting rid of him who wants to retire in that place?
Here's the other thing, too, is that when you had the people that, like, had the most success, right, it was Bobby Petrino and it was Houston Nutt. And now Houston Nutt wasn't, like, on the same level as Bobby Petrino, but, the dude had some issues with, like, Gus Malzahn and the whole quarterback situation and all this, like, different, like, things that behind the scenes that were issues. Petrino obviously had a mountain of issues behind the scenes. So it's like, if you're going to go out here and make this hire of, like, here's a good old boy that really, really cares about the program, is going to do all the things the right way. It's also on the same coaching tree as Kirby Smart. So, like, that's a great hire. But if you don't want that and you want to win, do you make a move kind of like, not to be rude to this team, but like what Auburn did, which is like, yeah, we're going to catch some heat for what we did, but we want to win football games. That's where we're going to bring in a guy like Hugh Freeze, who's a perfect fit for Auburn.
Yeah, 100%. Chris, last question before we get you out of here. Double-edged sword question here.
Oh, boy.
So somebody who started off hot this year in the SEC that you think is going to fade towards the end of the year, and then on the opposite end of that spectrum, who is someone you think that's coming out of the gates a little slow that'll be playing their best ball at the end of the year?
I'll start with the gates. They're coming out of the gates slow, and I'll say Texas A&M because I still believe in that offense, and I still think they're going to be able to put up points and all that kind of stuff. And we don't know anything about Miami. We just assume they suck because people on social media told us they did all offseason. So
dude, it would not shock me if Miami's playing in Charlotte for the ACC championship game.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that, like, I don't know what kind of weight that'll hold because I feel like the fans in football are it's so much of a confirmation bias and preconceived notions of, like, you want to see what you want to believe, right? Like it's like I'm going to convince myself that I was right about this or that. So I'm not going to sell all my shares with Texas A&M. I think they have a ton of talent there. There's definitely some issues that are concerning for sure, and Jimbo is a concern as well. But I just think they have so much talent on that team that it would be very difficult to have a continued flop like you saw last season. The team that is coming out of the gates hot and fading, that could fade the most, I hate to say it, but like the money would be on Ole Miss or Auburn. And Auburn, I wouldn't even want to throw in there because it's like, it's 3-0. Like, what are the expectations, whatever. But with Ole Miss, you saw it last year with at one point in the season, they were 7-1. They were ranked 11th in the country going to that Bama game, and you lose 5 straight, and you get, Kiffin to fleece you into a lifetime contract or whatever it was, like a 7-year contract. I think those two are probably the best. They have the best chances to do that. Out of the East, maybe you could maybe say Tennessee, because Tennessee's got a couple sneaky games in there where, like, I don't think UTSA is, like, if Frank Harris is healthy, necessarily a gimme. I mean, a gimme. But you get A&M at home. You still have Bama. You have Kentucky laying in the weeds there. It's going to be on the road at Kentucky. You get Georgia. So that's another one I can see as well.
Yeah, and so you talk before we get you out of here. You bring up the Ole Miss. Yeah, I remember 7-1 last year. The thing is, too, I mean, if they lose this week and then LSU comes to town the next week, you start off 0-2. You have a lot of transfer portal kids, as you know. You get a little bit where, we're 0-2, dude. Probably, I mean, mathematically, you're not out of the SEC West race, but let's be honest, we're probably not winning out, boys. Like, realistically, and those kids kind of cash it in. Like, you hate to say that, but like that's what happened. You start 0-2 in conference. I mean, in 3 weeks here, we may be talking Ole Miss a little differently. I'm not ready to predict that, but you could.
And there's so many sliding doors with all SEC teams because the way those schedules are set up, where it's like, I mean, like, listen, like, make no mistake about it, Bama's in a must-win this weekend, because I said all offseason that the thing that's scary about Alabama is I thought they would lose to Texas, and I said all offseason they would lose by 10-plus points. The terrifying thing for Alabama is they have the talent, and they're good enough to win 11 games on the schedule. But if they're out of it before November, because they haven't been out of it before November since 2007 or 2006, actually, then I mean, like, for real. So, like, because even in 2007, they were playing LSU.
They had a chance. If they beat LSU that year, they probably go win the West. Well, they lost to State the next week, but I think a lot of that had to do with the hangover from losing LSU. Right. But at our point, they're in the West conversation in November. Yeah. Right.
And so they haven't been in that situation where you're going to be out. And like, and I think that's a scary, scary place for Bama to live, because not only would they be out, but you'd be out earlier than, like, I think that's why it's such a, I remember asking Josh Pate this. Do you think there's a better chance of them going 12-0 or 8-4? Because I think if you get 1 or 2 losses, you can see them start to stack up, and you can make that case for a lot of SEC teams, including Alabama.
Absolutely. Well, Chris, I appreciate you, man. Appreciate you joining us. Everybody, Chris Marler from Saturday Down South joining us. If you don't follow him on Twitter already, go give him the follow at Vern Funquest. Chris, man, I appreciate it. We got a great weekend ahead. Look forward to talking to you here in the future. We'll get you on later.
Sounds good, brother. You have a good night.
You too, man. Chris Marler, guys, again, from Saturday Down South, joining us on this episode of Mach 10 Sports. You heard him. Always brings up good points, just full of facts. A great follow, a comedic follow on there. Keeps things loose, but also keeps things very objective. He's a very honest, objective guy, Alabama fan. But again, I mean, SEC wide open this year, guys. We could be talking different about Ole Miss in 3 weeks. Alabama season. Is it a season on the brink this weekend? Must win. I think it's a must win. Chris said it's a must win. Talking about Arkansas. I mean, who are they going to go get if they got rid of Sam Pittman? But this rough stretch for Sam Pittman coming up at LSU this week, Texas A&M and Arlington the next week, at Ole Miss, and then at Alabama. It's 4 straight weeks being away from home. You just lost to BYU. You got 2 new coordinators. What's that going to look like? Tennessee, how do they rebound? They got a tough stretch coming up. Everybody's got a tough stretch coming up. SEC a little disappointing right now, right off the bat. Long season to go, man. But one of the more parity-filled seasons I've been around in a long time. Interesting for sure, though. But around the SEC, let's get to it. Nick Saban announced Jalen Milroe, the starting quarterback. We talked with Chris about it. It's to be expected. I think it gives Alabama the best shot to win football games. Now, I think some of this now is on Tommy Rees. You got to be able to willing to adapt your offense a little bit. You got to incorporate him more in the design quarterback running game. You have to. You got to give him easy throws. He also has to be able to ability to process and go through progressions and hit some throws underneath and in the intermediate route. So it goes both ways. I know Tommy Rees wanted to give his guy Tyler Buckner a shot. I didn't think that was a bad move. I've stated on. I thought there was a game to do it. It was your last opportunity of the year to give those last 2 guys a shot, and Ty Simpson and Tyler Buckner. I don't really think it hurt anything. The game was ugly. You've announced Jalen Milroe. We'll see how it goes, but Jalen Milroe is officially the starting quarterback according to Nick Saban at his press conference today. And also, in case you missed it last night, Lane Kiffin calling a random press conference stating that some of his analysts said it looked like cornerbacks coach Tavares Robinson, who is known as T-Rob, is calling the defense right now at Alabama, not Kevin Steele. Total troll move, mind games from Lane Kiffin here. This is like WrestleMania CM Punk trying to play some mind games with The Undertaker. This is it. It's early in the week. This is going to be ongoing. I think Kiffin meets 2 more times. He's got his show on Thursday, and he's got his media. I forget what Ole Miss does, probably Tuesday or Wednesday when they meet, or Wednesday probably when he meets with the media again. This is going to be it. This is Lane Kiffin. He sees this as his best opportunity since he's been at Ole Miss. He probably thought that last year too, to beat Alabama. And he's probably right, because Ole Miss right now is a better football team than Alabama going into this week. Does that mean Ole Miss is going to go into Bryant-Denny Stadium and win this game? No, I don't think so. I don't think that's what it means. I'm not ready to predict that. Could Ole Miss win this game? Absolutely. Ole Miss is the better football team right now. Am I confident they go win this game this weekend? You have to stay tuned for the Thursday episode. But again, Lane Kiffin and Kevin Steele do not get along. This is what some of this is. 2 guys that are just do not really get along, have some beef. Remember, they were on the 2014 staff together? Yeah, and then Steele went to LSU in 15. Yep, that's right. Then he went to Auburn. These 2 kind of have a bone to pick. Don't really get along. These are mind games from Lane Kiffin. Like I keep saying, think CM Punk from a WWE perspective playing mind games with The Undertaker a week before WrestleMania. That's what it is. This is what it is. Lane Kiffin's trying to get into the head, trying to mess around with people inside that building. I don't really think it's going to work, and I don't really think it's going to have an impact on the game, let's be honest. But it's Lane Kiffin. He's a classic troll. I mean, Nick Saban came out today and stated that wasn't true. I think they just are having some communication issues with T-Rob signaling it in. Remember, Kevin Steele and Tommy Rees are both Alabama's coordinators are in the box. Kevin Steele, I think, likes to be in the box more so. When I was with him at Auburn, he felt more comfortable up there. I remember him saying that. But again, just total mind games from Lane Kiffin. Really does remind me of like some WWE segment. It's crazy. It should be a wild week from the Alabama Ole Miss drama fill perspective. Speaking of Ole Miss, the former Ole Miss coach, now Auburn head coach Hugh Freeze, word about the Tigers' health heading into conference play. They go to College Station this week. It's concerning, quote, Hugh Freeze says right now, the list they gave me this morning, it just hasn't been good for us for injuries this year. It's a quote from Hugh Freeze. Auburn's banged up. I'll tell you right now, I like A&M in this game. I'm not ready to make a prediction, but I like A&M in this game. I think this is A&M's their other opportunity to go make a statement. Again, I don't think Auburn's some great team, but A&M needs to be coming in and play with their hair on fire. This is a chance. I don't really like Auburn's chances in this from a I don't think they'll be able to keep up with Ole Miss. With Texas A&M offensively. I just really don't think they will. They're banged up. Hugh Freeze knows it. They're getting thin. They're getting thin up front. But Auburn injured right now. Hugh Freeze does not feel good about it. Sam Pittman has his own injury concerns, especially with running back Rocket Sanders. Quote, I don't know if he's going to be able to play or not, Pittman says. I'll tell you in all honesty, it's probably too early to tell. They go to Baton Rouge this week. They have a hellacious trip ahead. They have a hellacious 4 games ahead. They got at LSU this week. I mentioned it earlier. A&M in Arlington, at Ole Miss, at Alabama. It's 4 straight. They're a month away from Fayetteville. That's a lot. Remember, the A&M game's a neutral site game. Does not sound like Rocket Sanders will play this week. I've heard it's a meniscus issue. It's not out, but I'm just telling you here because we give you the best information here at Mach 10 Sports. The SEC hands out some suspensions for the final play of the Tennessee-Florida game. In case you missed it, 13 seconds. Tennessee's down 9. For whatever reason, Josh Heupel called a timeout. Someone took a shot at Graham Mertz. Some punches were thrown. To be fair to Josh Heupel, he apologized to Billy Napier later. But Tennessee defensive lineman Omar Norman Lott and 3 Florida players will be suspended for a half of their games this week for their part in a fight at the end. The Vols lost Saturday to the Gators. The SEC announced Florida's players suspended will be starting right tackle Damian George, who actually played really well this past week. Looked terrible against Utah, but he bounced back this week. But he'll be suspended for the first half against Charlotte. Micah Maskua will also be suspended, and then tight end Dante Zanders will be suspended for the first half against Charlotte on Saturday. LSU, around the SEC, a lot of injury bugs going around. LSU's injuries on Monday. Kelly updated his injury report. Omar Spates did not play. He thinks he'll play this week. Ovi Ogufo, he didn't play last week. He thinks he'll play this week. And then Mason Taylor, the tight end, was probable against State. Didn't feel good in pregame warmups, but he should be able to be available against the Arkansas Razorbacks on Saturday night. However, Greg Brooks, DB, a medical emergency. So prayers for Greg Brooks, but it sounds like he's out this week as well. So injuries, a lot of injuries around the SEC right now. Again, I mean, it's going into week 4. This is when depth starts to come in, and the people when they're making predictions, don't talk about depth enough, but here it is. Also, let me share the screen real fast. The SEC released its week 5 TV slate. Let me share the screen for you. We will show you this. This is week 5. This is not this week, but next week. Remember, they always announce 10 days out. So, Florida at Kentucky, noon Eastern on ESPN or SEC Network. Texas A&M, that game in Arlington at noon Eastern on ESPN or SEC Network. So both those games are at noon, just depending on what ESPN family and network it'll be on. Georgia at Auburn is the 2:30 CBS game if you're in the Central Standard Time Zone, as you can tell, on 3:30 p.m. Eastern if you're in the Eastern Time Zone. That's this SEC CBS game of the week. Missouri at Vandy on the SEC Network at 3. LSU at Ole Miss, 5 p.m. Central Standard Time Zone on ESPN. South Carolina at Tennessee, 6:30 p.m. Central Standard Time Zone on the SEC Network. And then the late one, 9 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. Central, Alabama at Mississippi State on ESPN. So it looks like at the nightcap, you'll have LSU at Ole Miss on ESPN at 5, and that'll roll right into the Alabama at Mississippi State game at 8, 5 to 8. What are we doing here from this window? Games don't last just 3 hours, guys. All right, so I'm announcing it for you here. Breaking news. Alabama at Mississippi State will start on ESPN News. Would bet my life on that one. Now, granted, I did bet my life Vanderbilt would get win over 3.5. Not looking good for us right here. Not looking good for me, Clark Lee, or the Commodores. But again, guarantee you this game starts off on ESPN News. Come on. We got to be better here, ESPN. What are we doing? But that is the Week 5 slate announced today. So not this week, but next week's TV schedule. If you want to look at it just one more time all the way through, just all SEC matchups across the board. Should be another fun weekend. Let's get back to it. But it's time. Little week 3 review. Alabama starting off 17-3 win over South Florida and Tampa. One of the worst offensive Alabama games that I can remember since the early 2000s. It was a disaster of a performance. I mean, that's hard to say, too. It was awful. I mean, the only bright spot I would say was Roydell Williams ran hard in the fourth quarter. I mean, we all know about the quarterback position, and Tyler Booker was also out at the guard spot, but the offensive line's performance was horrendous. True freshman Caden Proctor just cannot handle speed rushers. Big adjustment. I understand he's a true freshman. He's going to end up being a good player, guys, but just a big adjustment from Iowa high school football. Anybody could tell you. My wife could tell you that. Also, too, not all in the offensive line, the extra blockers. When I say extra blockers, I'm talking about tight ends and running backs. We're not good either. Amari Nyblack, Jace McClellan. I'm pulling up the film for you right now. Let's pull it up. Sharing you the screen right now. Right here. All right. Big screen for you right here. Situation 3-3. Real barn burner, you can tell. Third quarter, 10:43 left. 3rd and 10. Bama's at midfield trying to get something going offensively. I think they just got a penalty. It was supposed to be 3rd and 5. They got a penalty, back them up 3rd and 10. But here you go. I mean, look at Jace McClellan here. Offset, right here, Ty Simpson. Just does not have – you got to put your nose in the honey here if you're Jace McClellan. Let's play the film. This is a piss-poor effort. This is a poor effort by Jace McClellan here in protecting the quarterback. No, he doesn't want it. He doesn't want it there. That's the stuff I'm talking about, guys. That's the stuff I'm talking about. Just not good, man. It's on the offensive line as well, but I just wanted to bring some of this stuff because everybody's crushing the offensive line, myself included. The extra blockers, the running backs and tight ends weren't good. I mean, that's soft stuff right there, man. Jace, you got to put your face mask on this guy. You got to put your face mask on this guy. I mean, this is a DB, a nickel coming in and just running right over you to make the sack. That's bad. That's not good. I mean, you had to think he got ripped here. You had to think, in review this week, had to have gotten ripped here. This is can't have that. Can't have that. Again, offensive line, I mean, you're trying to help the true freshman out here on the left side of the line. He's struggling picking up blitzers, and your running back can't even take a nickel that he sees. It's not even like he sees him late. Put your nose in there, man. Protect your quarterback. Have some pride in your performance, man. It's bad. It's just bad football. Bad football. Bad football across the board there. But from the other extra blockers, I mean, call me crazy here, but guys like Robbie Oots, CJ Dupree are going to be very important on how much this team can improve. You have to use them in protection. You have to help the true freshman Caden Proctor out on that side. You just have to. Now this comes out on Tommy Rees. They've announced the starting quarterback, Jalen Milroe. Now Tommy Rees has to build a game plan to play to his strengths and help protect him. Use him in the design quarterback runs. We need to address these issues with the extra blockers. Running backs got to get better in pass protection. And then you have to use Robbie Oots and CJ Dupree. I think Oots can be fine in the pass. I think he's a willing blocker, and I think he wants to help. But again, the effort across the board, very poor offensively. Now, there have been some rumors out there. I think I saw Josh Pate put it. It wouldn't shock me that he thought some players were boycotting because they benched Jalen Milroe. Unless we're in the locker room there, I'm not going to go take off and run with that one. Just not. Now, moving to quarterback. I think Ty Simpson played fine, but just was not exceptional at anything. Took too many sacks, had as many sacks as I think completions. A lot of them weren't his fault, though. 5 sacks, 5 completions. But again, it's irrelevant at this point. Nick Saban announcing Jalen Milroe this afternoon as the starting quarterback. He's just going to have to improve, and the game plan is going to have to be built around getting some things out quick because the offensive line can't protect. Milroe struggles to process. Use some screens. I mean, I just don't understand why offensive coordinators don't take more advantage of the quick game these days. Why not? Why don't they? But again, until Alabama can prove they have a short intermediate game, teams are just going to load the box. And yeah, it's going to be on the offensive line, but they're not going to have enough hats to block the hats across from them. They're going to be outnumbered in the box, 8, 9 men in the box. Just continue to load the box and blitz on rundown. That's all that's going to happen. But defensively, I like some things. I like the defense. Is it shut down? No. But who really has a shutdown defense anymore in today's modern college football? You give up yards between the 20, but locked down in the red zone. And again, they played really good. They only gave up 3 points, and it was off a short field, off a Kool-Aid McKinstry muff punt. I mean, they've played one bad quarter through 3 games, and I'm not saying they played the greatest show on turf here. I mean, they played Middle Tennessee State, Texas, and South Florida. But again, only played one bad quarter, in my opinion, through 3 games. But they will be tested this week because Lane Kiffin knows holes in this defense. We will really get a good gauge of how good this defense is around 6:30 on Saturday evening this week. The offense has to get going. Overall, though, the offense has to get going because the defense they're not going to be able to consistently hold teams to 24 points or under every game. That's a tough task. I mean, in 3 games against Alabama, I think Lane Kiffin's came up with a good game plan. As me and Chris were talking about the 21 game, just a perfect storm. You had Bama play really well defensively that day, but the 2020 game and last year, they created some opportunities for themselves vertically downfield. Then for Bama, wrapping them up here, penalties are becoming a thing again. Alabama has had 3 touchdowns called back through 3 games on penalties. You could say a turnover. Kool-Aid McKinstry's interception last week was overturned because of a face mask penalty on Alabama. Come on, guys. You got to get better. And again, like Chris mentioned, Alabama's season is on the line this week. And this is the most shaky I've seen the Alabama program since 2006 under Mike Shula's first season. Ole Miss is coming in seeking blood. They want to win this game. They got a lot of former staff members from Alabama on this staff. Obviously, Lane Kiffin, Pete Golden, Charlie Weiss Jr., Wes Neighbors, a ton of guys. You don't think those guys want to go beat their former boss? I mean, Lane Kiffin would give up his first child to go win this game. He thought he had him last year. He smells blood in the water. That's why he's throwing up. That's why he's trying to play these mind games and say Kevin Steele is not calling the defense and it's T-Rob now. It's just him trying to play mind games. Alabama better show up to the lunch pail this week. I'm telling you. It's the first time this early in the season you can say Alabama's season is on the line this week. See how they answer. I'm with Chris. I'm tired of the talking. These players meeting guys are not good things. You saw Tennessee. They had a player, quote-unquote, players meeting last week, and they went to Florida and got their butt whipped. Usually you're having a players meeting. It's not good. There's usually a lot of blame pointed. And sometimes teams don't come out of it better than when they went in. Just telling you, from somebody who's played sports for a while, been around college football. But how about those LSU Tigers, baby? LSU 41-14 over Mississippi State. Heat check for Jaden Daniels. Heat check, man. It's like he's shooting behind the arc. It's like Steph Curry back there, man. The guy finished 30 for 34, 2 touchdowns. His buddy Malik Neighbors, 13 receptions, 239 yards, and 2 touchdowns. I mean, both Neighbors and Brian Thomas just ran by Mississippi State secondary. It was a race to the back pylon. And Mississippi State secondary is not very good. LSU just used their athleticism, and Jaden Daniels just could not miss. Defensively, LSU dominated State up front. Again, I've told Mississippi State fans, I know you had 4 starters come back on the offensive line, but it's a completely new system. There's going to be some issues. I think State's going to get better as the year goes on offensively, but they're just not there right now. Mekhi Wingo just doing what he wants on the interior of that LSU defensive line, playing at a very high level. LSU needs him to continue to be playing at that. I thought, like I said, I think LSU's front was going to have their best day of the year. Savion Jones looked really good, had a couple sacks off the edge there. Said it would be LSU's best game up front, and it was. Offensively for State, they just look like they're trying to fit a square peg into a round hole. Looks like they don't really know if they want to be a – I know this isn't it because I don't sit in the meetings, but it just looks like they can't decide if they want to be a spread team or a pistol team, offset running back. They just look like they don't know what they just can't decide what they want their identity to be. Again, fitting a square peg through a round hole. State's going to have to go win some games ugly to get to 6 to 7 wins this year. They really are. To get to 6 to 7 wins this year, it's going to win some ugly games. They got a big one coming up this week in Columbia, South Carolina. Both them and South Carolina need this win. It's at South Carolina. Probably say the Gamecocks needed a little more, but how does Mississippi State bounce back from this? Zach Arnett, first-year head coach. These are things that you don't have to deal with as a coordinator, but as a head coach, you got to rally all 130 of your players. I know you got 85 on scholarship. I don't know how many guys Mississippi State carries. Sometimes it's 120 to 130 at different places I've been if you include walk-ons. But how do you get 120, 130 guys on the same page after a bad loss at home like that? First-year head coach, those are the challenges you're going to have to take. It's be interesting to see how they bounce back. We talked about Ole Miss a little bit already. Ole Miss getting the 48-23 win over Georgia Tech. Game was closer than the score indicated. But I will say it again, Jackson Dart is the heart and soul of this Ole Miss team. Offensive line's looking a little bit better, protecting him a little bit. Quinshon Judkins banged up a little bit. Sore ribs, bruised ribs I'm hearing. Still played some. Again, I think he's missing Zach Evans to take the load off a little bit. Ulysses Bentley is a good change of back, but he's more of a scat back. I'll say this right now, and I'm sure this won't go over well. But I could see Quinshon Judkins having a little bit of a sophomore slump. Again, he misses Zach Evans in that running back room. He really does. And I'm not a big Zach Evans guy, but that's a good running back to be taking the load off Quinshon. It is. Again, I thought Evans had his own issues, but naturally this is going to affect Quinshon. But it's just never discussed. People just assumed he would pick up right where he left off. But I was always concerned about Ole Miss's depth at running back. He's banged up a little bit right now. Just will be interesting. Ole Miss as a whole a little bit banged up. I think they feel like they're pretty good about getting some. They feel good about getting some guys back. I know they practiced today. Wide receiver Trey Harris practiced. When are they going to get Zachary Franklin back? And then Caden Prescore, the tight end from Memphis that's been hurt. He started practicing today. Will he play this week? I don't know. I do think they feel good about Trey Harris playing in Tuscaloosa this week. Ole Miss. Looking back on them, they changed. I think Pete Golden and them went in and did a good job filling a little bit better than I even thought on the back end. I think they're a little bit more athletic. I think guys like Ladarius Tennyson, who transferred from Auburn 2 years ago, look improved. 6 and 13 are their guys in the defensive backfield. I already mentioned Tennyson and Zamari Walton, the Georgia Tech transfer. They're bigger, longer, more athletic this year. I'm not saying they're great by any means, but through 3 games, you can tell Ole Miss is a little bit better on the back end. And some of that may be scheme. And that's a credit to Pete Golden because he knew he was going to have to cover up some of those deficiencies on the back end. But they did as good as they could. Give them credit. I did not think it'd be that good, but I can admit where I'm wrong at times. They're just a bigger, longer, I think, and just more athletic group than they were last year. I will say the linebackers, besides Centurion Perkins, do look a little slower. They do look a little slower. Guys like Jeremiah Jean-Baptiste, who I was with at UCF, he looks a little slower. They do. I do think there's some things defensively you can exploit on the edges with Ole Miss, but you got to be willing to do it. I think Cedric Johnson is a guy, if you're playing Jalen Milroe, like Alabama's going to start this week in the option read game, I think you can get him. He's a little heavy-footed, stiff in the ankles, struggles to redirect. I think you can play off him, read him, and Alabama could have some big plays on the ground. But give Georgia Tech credit, man. I told people they were better. They're more improved than people thought. They're a team that improved their athletic ability, length, and size overall. So, give Brent Key and them credit. They did the best they could to go fill the back end of that roster. Game was much closer than the 48-23 final. But again, Ole Miss, I think they're rolling into Tuscaloosa as we stand right now on September 18th, the Monday before the game. They're the better football team than Alabama right now. It's going to come down to Jackson Dart, though. Jackson Dart is the heart and soul of this team. Ole Miss is going to go as far as Jackson Dart carries them. It's not Quinshon Judkins, guys. It's Jackson Dart. Georgia, a little bit of a scare, guys, but we'll get into that in just a second. Getting the 24-14 home win over South Carolina. Give the Gamecocks some credit here, guys. Give them some credit in this one. They came out swinging and punched Georgia in the mouth in this first half. The thing that impressed me the most with South Carolina was their play on both sides of the line of scrimmage in the first half. The offensive line was even getting some push. They struggled still some, but I like the game plan by Dow Logan. Get some quick stuff out, call in the screens when they needed to. When Georgia was blitzing, they get it out quick. They busted one. We'll talk about that one in just a second with Juice Williams. But the defensive line, going to the other side of the ball real fast, just playing their tail off. Guys like Tonka Hemingway, TJ Sanders are winning their one-on-one matchups. Let me show you just real fast. Share the screen. All right, here we go, guys. Situation here, full game here. First quarter, 7:41 left, 2nd and 1. South Carolina scored on their opening drive. Watch TJ Sanders here. Just come disrupt this play, make a play in the backfield, and a shade technique up there at the top on the inside. Interior defensive lineman right here. Get this on mute for you. 2nd and 1. Watch TJ Sanders right here. Look at that. If South Carolina can get consistent play up front like this, look out. Just the consistency is good. This is what I thought you'd see a little bit against North Carolina. You did. Just they won a lot of their one-on-one battles on the defensive line up front in this game in the first half. TJ Sanders played his tail off all game. Played a really good game. But I just wanted to bring this up, just show you. It's what South Carolina is capable of. Can they keep the same intensity week in, week out? Now, that's easier said than done. But again, that's what it's going to take. They got a big one on their hand this week. But back to this game. Going back to the first series for South Carolina, the 3rd and 15 where Georgia decided to blitz, and South Carolina threw the screen out to Juice Wells, who broke a few tackles for a scoring touchdown. Great call by Dow Logans. Georgia gambled. They got it out quick. South Carolina scored. But give Georgia credit, as they did what championship programs do. They answered the bell. They were down 14-3 at half. But man, they came out rolling. Mike Bobo, Georgia offensive coordinator, looked like he opened up the offense more in the second half and started to take South Carolina started to take more shots on South Carolina's secondary, more vertically and horizontally. You saw Mississippi State transfer Ra Thomas in this game, especially in the second half. I think you start to see more of him as the season goes on. But that first half, man, it looked more a little bit like 2019 Georgia with Jake Fromm that would be tied with Kentucky 3-3 going into the fourth quarter. Just a very conservative approach there by Mike Bobo and them. But you know who I want to give a shout out here is Daijun Edwards, man. He is the key to Georgia's offense right now. I'm telling you, Georgia's getting thin up front. Kendall Milton's out. Georgia's got a long list of injuries right now. And that's crazy to say, but one individual running back coming off an injury at Georgia, he's big for it. He went down, Georgia, that's trouble. I don't know with the schedule, but long-term national championship success, that could be trouble. Daijun Edwards just going down. Possesses great patience and visions, always falling forward. I do think this is a concerning stat, though, if you're a Georgia fan, when you face one of the better teams in the country. 21 of his 28 completions, Carson Beck here, 21 of his 28 completions were within 5 yards of the line of scrimmage. You got to start stretching the field more. You can't hold his hand. You're going to have to trust him to make some plays downfield at some point if you're Kirby Smart, Mike Bobo. Flipping to the other side, the Georgia defense just flies around and makes plays. Did they miss a few tackles in the first half and allow Xavier Leggett, who's just kind of reminds you of a bunch of some of those Ole Miss receivers, the big ones they used to have, DK Metcalf, AJ Brown, guys like that who used to go win one-on-one matchups even if the defender was there. That's Leggett this year. Mismatch nightmare. Georgia, Michael Williams going to be a force to be reckoned with. I thought Demas Johnson made plays as well. I didn't think Spencer Rattler played real bad, but I think Georgia kind of got to him in the second half. But you could tell he knew the game was getting a little bit away from them in the second half, started forcing some things, holding the ball too long, taking some sacks. But again, going back to South Carolina, if they can bring that intensity on both sides of the line of scrimmage in every game, they can get back in that 7, maybe 8-win potential down the road. I'm just telling you, that was impressive up front. They went and battled their tail off, and no one, even myself included, gave them a chance. I think everybody thought Georgia was going to go in there and make a statement. They did in the second half, but man, South Carolina came out fired in the first half. But it starts this weekend for South Carolina at home against Mississippi State. Now, must-win situation, I think. You got a Mississippi State team reeling, coming in, licking their wounds. But Carolina has to have this one. Georgia's fine. But what scares me is the health on offense and Mike Bobo not feeling comfortable calling the offense right now. Like I said, it looks like 2019 Georgia that knows they can survive the first 12 games without playing turnover-free football and playing good defense. But however, when they face a good team, and Georgia may go play a BB- game, they can't stretch the field, and they're in a semifinal, it's lose or go home, you don't want to find out your weakness is too late. It concerns me a little bit, Georgia, that and their health. But Georgia getting the big win, big second half comeback, 24-14 over South Carolina to get to 1-0 in the league. Florida, 29-16 win over Tennessee. Great game plan overall on both sides of the ball by Florida. Offensively, Florida played about as well as they could have from an efficiency standpoint. For Graham Mertz, it reminded me a little bit of a Brock Purdy, Iowa State type game. Just efficient, not overly sexy, finished 19 for 24 with just a touchdown. But again, he got them in the right calls, got them in the right checks. Played really good within that system. Florida won most of the offensive plays before the ball was even snapped. Let me show you right here. Motioned them to death to start the game with Eugene Trey Wilson. Bringing it in right here. Let's see. Just want to show you just a few clips right off the bat. All right, watch. Florida just coming out. This is their first drive. Just motioning Tennessee to death, getting them to run laterally. And then as the game kept going on, they started using Trevor Etienne and them to just knife through the tackles, through the inside run game. I mean, look, all over the place. Give it to Trey Wilson again. If you're not familiar with Trey Wilson, Eugene Wilson went out with an injury. Didn't seem like it was long-term, Billy Napier said. But again, just using the motion game. Got Tennessee all confused. All it takes is just half a second to get one of them off balance. He makes plays. That's what they did. This whole first drive. It ended up in a missed field goal, but the Trevor Etienne busted one through the middle of the defense the very next series. Motioning the tight end over. Did a really good job. Just overall did a really good job motioning, getting Tennessee outside their lanes, getting them just a half second too late. Just want to talk about some of that stuff. That's good. That's very impressive. I thought Florida would come in with a very different game plan than you saw against South Carolina, than against Utah. That was impressive. That was impressive. Give them credit. God, I mean, give everybody on Florida's staff credit. I mean, Tennessee was playing a lot of palms up defense. Just check who we going with here. How about Trevor Etienne, man? Contact balance, ability to run behind his pads. Yes, that's Travis Etienne's brother. He does a fantastic job. I love both Florida's running backs, Montrell Johnson and Trevor Etienne, both Louisiana guys. Then on defense, Austin Armstrong, former Southern Miss defensive coordinator, had a cup of coffee as the inside backers coach at Alabama. Just played a game of 5-on-5 basketball inside the box against Tennessee. That's what you have to do. If you can stop the run with 5 defenders inside the box, you're going to stop the Tennessee offense. That's the key to stopping the Tennessee offense. And then having guys like 99 Cam Jackson is an absolute monster for the Gators on the interior. Add in Tyreek Sapp played well. Caleb Banks played well. Florida's defensive line up front played really well overall. And that helped. It helped them stop the run with 5 guys in the box. Offensively, for Tennessee, I don't know how you just solely blame Joe Milton here. He wasn't the reason they just lost the game by himself. The offensive line was poor all night. The Ollie offensive lineman from Tennessee was just abused and confused all night. To be fair, the whole Tennessee offense was confused all night. If you want to go see one, go to the beginning of the fourth quarter. I don't think anybody knows what they're doing. Joe Milton, his receivers aren't on the same page. It looks like the signalers aren't on the same page with Joe Milton. Everybody's all over the place. Palms up on the sideline, palms up offense, all over the place. Tennessee just looked uncomfortable. I said if they did not go in prepared for this, Florida had their backs against the wall. They were playing for their season. Something Alabama's going to be facing this week. And Florida answered the bell. Give them credit, man. Florida answered the bell. Tennessee got some rough calls, though. I thought the blindside block they called on their tight end there as a bad call. That's not what they lost. But, again, some rough calls there. But, again, Tennessee is under Heupel's never played in an environment like they just played that. People were, well, they played at LSU last year and whipped them. Yeah, that game was at noon. If you ever been to Tiger Stadium, I know Tennessee doesn't go there a lot. Big difference between Tiger Stadium at noon and at night. This was the toughest environment Josh Heupel and his Tennessee program have been in, and they failed that test. They still got a couple more tough road trips. They go to Tuscaloosa in a couple weeks. Now, with the way Alabama's playing, I don't know if that'll matter. But again, and then Alabama's environment isn't that hostile right now. I mean, Chris was talking about it. But again, they're going to go into some other hostile environments. They're going to have to be ready. I think they miss Hendon Hooker more than people think. I've said that all offseason. The guy only had 2 career turnovers. Never looked scared, never looked overwhelmed. Sometimes Joe Milton looks overwhelmed, but again, a lot of that is the offensive line. He's got to get protection. Just like with Alabama's quarterback situation. It's not all on the quarterbacks. A lot of that's protection. But where does Tennessee go from this, man? They play UTSA at home this week, South Carolina at home the next week, A&M at home, and then at Alabama are the next 4. And where does Florida go from this from a positive way? They get Charlotte at home, at Kentucky, Vanderbilt at home, and at South Carolina. Do both these teams go opposite ways, fork in the road? Do they go opposite ways? Does Tennessee rally the troops? They have another players-only meeting. That didn't seem to help. But, man, honestly, give a tip of the cap to Florida's entire organization. Great playing on offense, great playing on defense. The fans, the coaches, the players, everyone played with a chip on their shoulder on Saturday night. Florida comes out with a much-needed win for Billy Napier. Great job by Florida. Moving on real fast, Arkansas dropped a close one to BYU 38-31, a true Monday morning quarterback game, in my opinion. A lot of, what if we did this differently? I mean, go back to the early third quarter decision by Sam Pittman. 10 minutes left in the third. I think Arkansas was up 31-21. 4th and 1, one of the more uncreative runs I can imagine. BYU stops them, turns the entire momentum of the game. Arkansas didn't ever really recover from that. Kind of seemed like Arkansas didn't think BYU, they thought BYU would just kind of lay down when they're up 14-0. And we'll get in that in just a second. But that kind of seems what it was like. Thought KJ Jefferson seemed fine, played a little off tilter some, but just, again, protection. A lot of this is protection stuff. Also, Arkansas's receivers just a very average bunch. Isaac Tesla, fine. He's okay. But I don't really see any difference makers out there. Also, where's the discipline? Arkansas's turnovers and penalties, 2 turnovers and 14 penalties. You ain't going to win many games doing that. Again, I think Arkansas thought BYU would just fold, being down 14-0 in Fayetteville. And they didn't. BYU's an older, aggressive team that's going to keep coming in. I don't mean aggressive by scheme. I just mean they keep playing hard. They're a very decisive, aggressive bunch. They're not just going to lay down. You have to deliver a knockout blow to put them out of the game. That's just what it is. You're playing a bunch of grown men. BYU just hung around, did enough to end up winning the game at the end. I'm telling you, man, that was a game Arkansas is going to look back at the end of the year and say, hey, we needed that one, and we should have had that one. This tough 4-game stretch coming up where they're away from Fayetteville for a month. Again, I've said it multiple times on this episode. At LSU this week, at A&M in Arlington at Jerry's World next week, at Ole Miss and at Alabama. Whew, man, it's going to define the season there. BYU, that was a rough home loss. From a single coach's perspective, worst loss of the season so far for an SEC team and the coach, it's probably this one, Sam Pittman. Talked about that going into last week. Eli Drinkwitz and Sam Pittman both needed it. I think Eli was a little bit more amplified. Just got to think his seat's a little hotter. And like me and Chris talked about it, I think Arkansas would be dumb to get rid of Sam Pittman. But again, this is a what have you done for me now? This is a winning business. People are going to, let's say they go lose 4 straight here. And they're sitting at 2-5, headed into week 7, week 8, whatever it is. It's not going to settle well in Fayetteville. I'm not saying it's going to be like that. Too early to predict. A lot of football. But again, it's a tough 4-game stretch where you're away from home. Arkansas dropped when they should have had. They had their foot on their throat. I really think that call on 4th and 1, that uncreative call when they're up 10 with 10 minutes left in the third quarter, swung the whole game. This is a game Arkansas is, I think, going to really look back at the end of the year and be like, what the heck, man? What the heck? Arkansas drops the one to BYU, though, 38-31. Another non-conference loss for the SEC. Not a good start in non-conference play. Speaking, though, positive for the SEC in non-conference play, Missouri getting a 30-27 win over Kansas State. Brady Cook stepped up with this one. This was his Kirk Cousins type. You like that kind of game, in my opinion. People doubted him, and this is him. You've seen the video of Kirk Cousins coming in to the locker room for the time the Washington Redskins after a playoff win and be like, you like that? I think this was, granted, this wasn't a playoff game, but this was the biggest win in the Eli Drinkwitz era, and the team needed it. Brady Cook stepped up when he had to. He hit some of the deep shots that he was missing throughout the first 2 games. Him and Luther Burden were connecting. It looked good, man. Throwing Theo Weiss as well. The end of the game management, though, where it was a 56-yard field goal in Drink and Brady Cook, as I was just bragging about him, but this wasn't good. Him and Drink taking the delay of game to make it a 61-yarder for Harris Mevis. They better be thanking their lucky stars for Harris Mevis, who drilled the 61-yarder. Probably have been good from 66. Can you imagine if Eli Drinkwitz in that post-game press conference having to answer that if they lost that game because he took a 5-yard delay of game because the 2-minute drill was just disastrous? But give them credit. They won the game. Missouri's ability to limit explosive plays through the air won the game. Massive win for Eli Drinkwitz. Sleepy game this week, though. Memphis and St. Louis. Memphis comes in undefeated. Not a bad team. Beat Navy in a close one last week. But this is a game, I'm telling you, this could be a sleepy game after a big win. Then SEC play coming up for Missouri next week. Missouri better be careful. But biggest win of the Eli Drinkwitz era. If he can keep adding on to this, they get 7 wins this year. Keep recruiting well. Drink's got this place set up well, and then NIL looks to be great in the state of Missouri. So that's a massive win for Eli Drinkwitz. Moving to some other of the games off the radar, just briefly talk about them. Auburn, 45-13 win over Samford. Some of my notes here. Defensively, I think Auburn looks solid again. Eugene Asante just all over the field right now, the inside linebacker. Best player on Auburn's front 7. Auburn tackling really well on defense right now. But what are we saying about Auburn's defense this time next week? Because they're about to go against, gotten some heck about this on social media, I think probably the best offense in the SEC right now. What are we going to be saying about this Auburn defense after they play a top 2 or 3 for sure offensive unit in the SEC, if not the best right now? I don't know. I don't know. It's too early to tell. Turnovers, though, I do know this. The turnovers are going to have to get better. They had 3 turnovers again after having 4 against Cal. That's how you get run out of Kyle Field. You go turn the ball over again 3 times. I think for Auburn to win this game, they're going to be plus 2 or 3 in turnover margin. Probably get 3 or 4 takeaways and maybe have 1 at max. You can't go in there and turn the ball over 2 or 3 times. It's just not going to happen. And it was Samford again, but I thought Peyton Thorne looked a little bit better. There's just some quick thoughts from the Auburn 45-13 win over Samford. Speaking of Texas A&M, Texas A&M got a 47-3 win over ULM. Going back watching the film, offense very creative right now. I'm very high on the A&M offense. A lot putting their playmakers in position to excel. Specifically, how they used Anais Smith this past weekend was impressive. I think Connor Weidman is a gamer. Kid has a chance to be a really good player by the end of this year. Still think the offensive line has to protect him a little better. Still some holes up front there that I think some teams could take advantage of. This goes for the extra blockers as well. Like I mentioned with Alabama, this goes with the tight ends, Jake Johnson, and some of the running backs. Moving to the defense, which is my concern. Defensively, you aren't going to get much from this game because ULM is not a threat to throw the ball, really run first. But Shamar Turner, dude, guy's an absolute freak flying around. I know he got into some trouble off the field, about a week ago. I think he's fine. But, man, on the field, dude's a total freak show. Again, A&M, that talent starting to catch up on the defensive on the front. I think the run game has improved. The defensive run game or the rushing defense has improved at A&M. Just that secondary. They got to get that figured out. 2 massive games coming up for the Ags as we start conference play. Auburn at home this week. Then they go to Arlington for the neutral site game at Jerry's World against Arkansas. They need both of these. Vanderbilt took a 40-37 loss to UNLV. Tough loss for the Doors right there. Tough loss from an over 3.5 win total bet. Not feeling good for them to go get 2 conference wins. Offensive line cannot hold up, cannot protect anyone. I like the offensive game plan, but the offensive line just cannot block, cannot get it done. Critical turnovers. I mean, they're up, 7 driving at the 50. They pull a fake. They're trying to run a reverse. They get beat so bad on the interior that the guy comes and disrupts the reverse that A.J. Swan's about to hand over, I think, to, was it Will Shepherd, causes a fumble. UNLV gets it. That was kind of the swing in that game. Like I talked about with Arkansas BYU. This was the swing in this one. Vanderbilt got off to a good start. This is a game they should have won. They're better than UNLV. Just critical turnovers kill you. Then finally, the worst position unit in the SEC, the Vanderbilt secondary, is just atrocious. Like we have stated numerous times since week 0. UNLV, their last drive to go win it. How you get behind the secondary like that is embarrassing. Even going back to watching the Wake game, it's either pass interference or a complete pass. Vanderbilt's got to up the personnel there. And I get it. Easier said than done. You recruit young talents on the back end. They play at Vanderbilt. They go get poached somewhere else. I understand. But again, God, Vanderbilt secondary just atrocious. Not good for Clark Lee and the Vanderbilt program. I like the direction of the program. Clark Lee has it going. But man, you can't be losing to UNLV and you're going into your 3rd year. And then finally, Kentucky got the 35-3 win over Akron. It feels like Kentucky's just sleptwalk. It's you watch the film each week. It's like, yeah, I see some things to work out on, but man, what's it going to look like when they play somebody in the SEC? But it's officially SEC week for Kentucky. Now it's Vanderbilt in Nashville. But this is probably their last game to iron some things out. Just like everyone else, Kentucky had a few appetizers to get ready for now, but so at least in the first 3 or 4 games, some people have played been challenged. Kentucky schedule set up perfectly for them this week. Because I think if they played somebody early, they may have already had a loss. Look, the turnovers and the missed assignments have to change for Kentucky, though. It's ugly to watch at times. The turnovers were rough this past week. Devin Leary has a ceiling through the roof, though, like we've all stated off season. Him and Dingle, the tight end. If you saw Cole Kublik posted it, looked really good. The ball up the seam, just threw it right through that window. It looked like an NFL throw there. But it's going to be fun to see his development through the season with him and Liam Cohen. But the Cats still have some things to clean up offensively, especially up front. They got Vandy this week, kind of probably their last week to iron some things out. But again, you got to be careful. You got to be careful overlooking Vanderbilt. You got to be careful heading to Nashville because you got Florida coming into town next week. Kentucky needs to lock in. Vanderbilt's not any good, and there should be yards and some explosive plays to have against the Vanderbilt secondary from a Devin Leary wide receiver standpoint for Kentucky. You can't sleepwalk in. Looking forward to Florida coming to town next week at the Crow. Kentucky's got some things to figure out, but I still like them in a SEC this year. It could be all over the place. But as you know, it is time for the SEC power rankings. Let me pull up the graphic for you guys. Pull it up. Sorry about that. One second. Let me pull it up. All right, here we go. Share it for you real fast. All right, here we go, guys, right here. All right, as you can see, the Week 4 SEC Power Rankings. We'll start off 14th. We're not surprising you here. Vanderbilt, nothing needs to be said. They're the worst team in the league right now. Coming in at 13th, Mississippi State. Got a lot of things to work on offensively. You got to decide who you want to be, guys. I feel like the defensive front seven, Jet Johnson, Nathaniel Watson, they'll be fine. Back in, though, got to get shored up. Some young cats, guys like Marcus Banks, have to step up. Sean Preston, their most veteran safety, is going to be suspended for the first half in South Carolina this week, which will be big. I expect South Carolina in the first half to go try to take some advantage of some explosive plays. But again, that's big for Mississippi State. Their veteran presence on the back end. It could be a tough one in Columbia this week. Number 12, Arkansas. Arkansas just turnover prone, penalties. I thought Arkansas would take a step back a little bit this year, but man, I keep saying it, this next 4 weeks are going to be tough. I just like them at 12 right now. Auburn, number 11, still not sold on the Tigers. Still think they got some things to work out. Injuries are hurting them right now. They can't have too many more injuries or it could spell trouble. Tennessee, I think they'll move back up in this. I got them at 10 right now. But I think there's some opportunities down the road for them to move up. But right now, I think they're sitting at 10. Kentucky, 9. Again, I think you can move Tennessee up to 9. Kentucky's got some stuff to iron out. They've been a little lucky. They've had some schedules or the schedule work out for them. They got one more week. They need to be careful. It gets real next week when Florida comes to town. South Carolina, if they can just play consistent, especially defensive up front like they did with Tonka Hemingway, TJ Sanders, I like them. They just need consistency for South Carolina. But they're coming in at number 8. Alabama, the lowest they've ever been in the Mach 10 SEC power rankings, coming in at 7, but I don't know how you couldn't put them there. Offense is horrendous. He's the worst offensive performance since – it's not even fair to Mike Shula, except maybe some of his first years. The Spencer Pennington, Brandon Avalos, if you go back that far from an Alabama standpoint. The offense was porous. The offensive line is porous. It's not like you just have bad quarterback play. You got an offensive line that can protect him. You can run the football. He has time in the pocket. No, just – what's the strength of the offense right now? I think you have some solid running backs in Jace McClellan and Roydell Williams. But, I mean, outside of that, there's no receiver that scares me. Quarterback certainly doesn't. The offensive line, we talked about that. I think Amari Nyblack could be used in certain situations, but you can't put him in a blocking situation because he's so bad in pass protection as an extra blocker. Alabama's defense, I like it right now. But in today's college football, there's just not a shutdown defense. That's not their fault. Asking to hold teams under 24 points is asking a lot. Bama comes in at 7th. They have an opportunity to move up in a must-win situation this week. Florida, team of the week. Very proud of them. Great game plan across the board from an organization. Their fans stepped up. Must win last week against Tennessee. They got it done. Florida moves up to 6. Man, do things look different from Florida just 2 weeks after an abysmal start against Utah that opening weekend on Thursday night. But, hey, they're 1-0 in conference play, man. I guarantee you if you ask Billy Napier what win he'd rather have is that Utah game or Tennessee game, it'd definitely be a Tennessee game because you're 1-0 in conference. Missouri, maybe a little higher than some people think, but I think Missouri, one of the better wins for the SEC in non-conference play. The defending Big 12 champs, the Kansas State Wildcats, big win for Eli Drinkowitz and the boys. Could be a big springboard game. Missouri's going to be sleepwalking into this Memphis game, though, in St. Louis. They need to be careful there, but I like Missouri at 5th right now. I could see them moving down a little bit, though, as the season goes on. Ole Miss, a team not officially ready to call them a top 4 team in the SEC right now, but I think you got to put them at 4th. Jackson Dart, heart and soul, one of the better quarterbacks in the SEC. They're the better team right now. Just can they rise to the occasion and go get a win in Tuscaloosa? I mean, they've only beaten Alabama, 4 times in the past 25, 30 years, 1 time in Tuscaloosa, 2015. Can they do it? I know Lane Kiffin, their staff members that have been at Alabama before, probably Jackson Dart, they're chomping at the bit. They thought they let one get away last year at their place, at their crib, at their house. They're trying to go steal one from Alabama. I mean, can you imagine Lane Kiffin if they go win this game? He's already King Troll. He's already doing it. But I think Ole Miss comes in at number 4. They've been playing some pretty good football. Number 3, some people are giving me hell for this one. I'm telling you, Texas A&M is one of the most talented teams in the conference. They can figure out the back end against quality competition. They're going to be fine. I stated it on Twitter yesterday. Do not be shocked if that matchup Thanksgiving weekend, Texas A&M at LSU, is for the SEC West. Do not be shocked. It's going to have some kind of bearing on the SEC West for sure. Don't be shocked if the winner take all for the SEC West. I'm telling you, I like A&M this week. Auburn's beat up. I know I don't give my previews until Thursday, but I'm giving you a little bit of a sneak preview here. Watch out. A&M is a good football team. Just got to figure out the secondary. I think Miami's going to be a little better than people think. Like I told Chris, do not be shocked if you see Miami playing in Charlotte for the ACC championship game. The divisions are done in the ACC. You got to finish in the top 2. LSU easily. You can maybe make an argument LSU's number one right now. I still don't think it's a fantastic LSU team. I think the SEC is a little down. But, man, they bounced back in a good way. I think some of LSU took advantage of Mississippi State's porous secondary play, but give them credit. I think Mississippi State didn't really give us an opportunity to really judge LSU secondary this past week. I don't really think they have any dudes on the outside to take advantage of that. I told you that in the preview of the LSU-Mississippi State game on Thursday. I still have question marks in that secondary, especially Greg Brooks looking like he may be out for the season. Again, prayers for him, a medical emergency, but I think they're going to be without him for a while. I like LSU, but I think they're the second best team. In the West right now, I'd favor them because I think they probably have the quarterback advantage with Jaden Daniels. But again, you can make a case to, in my opinion, LSU's number one with the way Georgia's kind of played sloppy halves at times. But coming at number one, the back-to-back defending national champs, Georgia Bulldogs, until someone knocks them off, they start playing really bad. You got to keep them at one. I was really impressed. That's how champions bounce back in that second half. Look like some Alabama used to do. Not play in the first half well, but come out and dominate the second half. I know it wasn't some dominating fashion, but again, Georgia looks like they're just kind of playing ball security. They don't think many people are going to go score on them. Hey, let's don't turn the ball over. Let's don't give to a team's short field position against our offense. Hey, South Carolina came out and scored opening drive. Great for them. They're not going to go put up sustained drives consistently. They got us on the 3rd and 15 on their first drive. We blitzed. We got aggressive. They got us on the screen. Wasn't that bad scheme-wise. Our guys were there. We just missed some tackles. But you know what? We'll give that up once a game. We don't think you can consistently score on us. I love Georgia's defense. The offense is going to have to start being a little bit more aggressive. 21 out of Carson Beck's 28 throws were 5 yards or less. Mike Bobo and Kirby Smart are going to have to trust him more. But again, this is the Week 4 SEC Power Rankings. The biggest move we had off all season so far through 3 weeks, through 4 weeks if you count week 0. But again, we could see a lot of movement after this week as well. Moving on. Week 4 preview. Here we go. Let's go back to share the screen. Let me get the Week 4 preview for you. Moving up right here. All right. Sorry, that was last week's scheduling. We flipped to Week 4 for you. All right, the Week 4 schedule here. Auburn at Texas A&M. Pull up some of these lines for you right here. Auburn at Texas A&M. Right now, you got A&M is favored by 6 at home in College Station. That game's at 11 a.m. Central Standard Time Zone on ESPN. Also, same time, 11 a.m. Central Standard Time Zone, Kentucky at Vanderbilt to open up conference play on the SEC Network. Kentucky is favored by 12 heading into that game right now. The 2:30 p.m. Central Standard Time Zone, SEC CBS, or the SEC on CBS game. We just talked about it. Ole Miss at Alabama. Big game for Alabama here. Currently, Alabama favored by 6. For whatever reason, I saw someone post it. Alabama jumped out as an 11-point favorite, but maybe it moved down to 6. But I'm looking at it. Alabama favored by 6 right now. Next, we got UTSA at Tennessee. Tennessee trying to get back to the winning ways. 3 p.m. Central Standard Time Zone kickoff on the SEC Network. Tennessee is favored by 17 heading into this one. Night game at Tiger Stadium. 6 p.m. Central Standard Time Zone kickoff. Arkansas at LSU on ESPN. LSU favored by 17 as well. Interesting there. Florida trying to keep in their winning ways. 6 p.m. Central Standard Time kickoff. Charlotte at Florida. What's the line there? Florida is giving up 24. So Florida's favored by 24 with the 49ers rolling to town. That game's on the SEC Network Plus, ESPN Plus. UAB heads to Georgia, 6:30 p.m. Central Standard Time Zone on ESPN2. Georgia's currently favored by 39. Again, this next one, Memphis at Missouri. This game is in St. Louis. Former, I think, RCA Dome, or not RCA, it's in Indianapolis, wherever the Rams used to play in St. Louis. 6:30 p.m. Central Standard Time Zone kickoff. Memphis at Missouri on ESPNU. Missouri, let me pull it up again, currently favored by 8. Giving Memphis 8, Missouri favored by 8. And then the nightcap on the SEC Network, 6:30 p.m. Central Standard Time Zone, Mississippi State at South Carolina on the SEC Network. South Carolina is currently favored by 6. So we got 3 conference games with the same line right now, 6. We got Alabama's favored by 6 against Ole Miss in Tuscaloosa. Texas A&M's favored by 6 at home against Auburn in College Station. And South Carolina is favored by 6 at home against Mississippi State. So those are the lines previewing just initially the Week 4 matchups in the SEC right now. And then let's start reviewing. Let's review the money-making weekend Week 4, we're better. We got better. We are 500. That's not where we want to be. As Coach Bryant said, that's a kick it. That's a kissing your sister. You haven't heard that line. It's a Bear Bryant line for what a tie was back when they did have ties in college football. We don't like that, but it was improved from the 1-6 start the week before. We're 40% on the season. We need to get in that 55% range. But again, if I can get up to 50% after this week, we're having a big week, more film, more time for me to dissect, get more money in your pocket. But our wins from this past week, Florida, Tennessee under 58.5, hit that. The Louisville team total under 31. They just got to 21. We hit that. South Alabama plus 7.5. South, the Jags won it up front and just physically dominated Oklahoma State. Won that. Then Jaden DeLaura, the Arizona quarterback, over 265 yards passing over UTEP. I think he got 310, so he cleared that. And then Georgia, South Carolina, the under 55.5. So those were my 5 wins. My 5 losses. The Florida team total under 26.5. They just got it. I think they got 29, scored 3 points in the second half. Georgia, again, that's why I was impressed with South Carolina. I thought they would come out there right off the bat, guns a-blazing. They didn't. You could tell at half, down 14-3, this wasn't going to hit. But minus 27.5, Georgia did not cover. That was a loss. Alabama, I put this in already. Probably wouldn't have done it once I heard. I should have went back and changed it. Tyler Buckner was going to start. Remember, we broke that here. Everybody's reporting other people. But again, us here at Mach Sports reported it first that Tyler Buckner was getting that start. But again, I should have changed that. That was on me. But I had Alabama minus 20.5 in the first half. Lost that one. Kansas minus 28, minus 28. Didn't cover that at Nevada. I think they won, 28-21, but they didn't cover the 28, so that was a loss. Then Georgia Tech, we could have been 6-4. Lane Kiffin backdoor covered us there. Georgia Tech minus 18.5 against Ole Miss. We did not cover that one. But they had it at the end. The final there, what was the final again? Going back there was 48-23, just barely got us. Barely got us by 25. Georgia Tech went and covered it. Then with about less than a minute left, Ole Miss bust a big run with their third-string running back to clear it. Tough loss there, but we went 5-5, 40% on the season. We got to get in that 55 more. That's our goal, 55, 60 for the season. We're going to get there. More film on the way. But it's the wrap for Money Making Weekend, and that is the wrap for this episode of Mach 10 Sports. I know there's a lot going on out there, 2 Monday night football games. I appreciate you joining us. We covered a lot. We had Chris Marler from Saturday Down South. You may know him better on his Twitter handle, @VernFunQuest. Talked a lot of SEC. Where Sam Pittman goes from here with a big loss to BYU. Tough 4-game stretch. We asked him Alabama's players-only meeting. What's that mean? Where does Tennessee go from here? A lot of SEC questions. Good, fun conversation with Chris Marler. We reviewed everything that was week 3 in the SEC. We went around the SEC. Lane Kiffin and him and Kevin Steele's beef, the mind games going, reminds me of some WWE stuff. We slightly previewed, gave you some initial betting lines heading into week 4. And then we reviewed Money Making Weekend. Went 5-5 this past week, 40% of the season. We're going to get that up. Remember, Thursday, we're going to be a little bit later again, probably closer 8:45. Got another personal thing to do from a baby class with our baby coming in November 18th, a baby boy. But we had to get that. But I got to go to the hospital for another class for that perspective. But we're still going to bring you the show. The show will still go on, as Leonardo DiCaprio said in Wolf of Wall Street. We're still going to bring it to you just a little later, 8:45 p.m. Central Standard Time Zone. That's prediction. It's going to be prediction week. First full – heck, we got a lot of matchups from the SEC this week. I mean, just the SEC alone, we got a lot of matchups just from that perspective. What do we got? Going to it right here. Just conference matchups. We got 1, 2, 3, 4. We got 5 matchups from the SEC. I mean, we got a lot of predictions, some unknowns. Ole Miss, Alabama. Got to go dissect into that to get your prediction on Thursday. Week 4 is going to be a blast, not only in the SEC, but nationally. We're in the midst of college football season. Guys, it'll be over before you even blink. Just embrace it. We only get a couple of these a year. We get about 12, 13 weekends of these a year. Just embrace it. This will be one of the best ones, I think. Week 3 wasn't sleepy, like we told you. Week 4 is going to be a blast. But again, I appreciate you joining us on this episode of Mach 10 Sports. Again, if you're joining us on YouTube, don't forget to like and subscribe. Give us some feedback, how you're liking the show. But again, make sure you like, subscribe, review us on all our podcast platforms, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, wherever you watch the show. Just give us some review. We'd love to hear from you. But again, I appreciate you joining us on this episode of Mach 10 Sports. You have a fantastic night.